I was sitting in row 3 of my sister's wedding, dressed in a borrowed gown and holding back the urge to disappear. My son Eli was beside me, wearing a thrifted suit 2 sizes too big, swinging his legs under the table. He was smiling. He thought this day meant we were family again. He had no idea what was coming. When my sister raised her champagne glass, I thought just for a second she might say something kind. She smiled sweetly, paused for effect, and then said, "To my big sister, the single mom. Strong, independent, and clearly unwanted by anyone else." The room erupted in laughter. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then, without missing a beat, my mother called out from her table, "She's a used product, but she still polishes up okay." More laughter, louder this time, crueler. That's when I saw the groom, my sister's perfect, polished fiancé, stand up. He didn't smile, he didn't laugh, he grabbed the mic, and the room froze. But before I take you to that moment, when everything shattered, I need to go back. Because stories like this don't start with a punchline. They start with 1,000 cuts before it. My name is Rachel. I'm 35. I live in a small apartment with my son, Eli. He's 8. He still believes in good guys, secret handshakes, and that kindness always wins. I've spent the last 8 years making sure he keeps believing that, even when I stopped believing it myself. My family, they don't know me, not really. They know a version of me that fits their story. The one they point to when they need a contrast for Natalie's perfect life. Natalie, the bride. My little sister, 5 years younger, a lifetime ahead, flawless, ambitious. The kind of person who walks into a room and people straighten their backs. She was always the favorite, not just because she was younger or prettier, but because she played the game. She smiled at the right time, laughed at the right jokes, said the right things. I didn't. I was 27 when I got pregnant. The father, Tom, was someone I thought I'd marry. He promised me the world and left before Eli even had a heartbeat. There was no big fight, no dramatic goodbye. One day he was planning nursery paint colors. The next, he vanished. No calls, no texts, nothing. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, holding the ultrasound photo with both hands, like it might vanish too. And I remember calling my mom. You'd think she'd ask if I was okay. But the first thing she said was, "You've always had a way of disappointing people." That set the tone for everything that followed. I became the cautionary tale. The family burden. Christmases were polite but cold. Eli and I always got gifts that felt like afterthoughts. Used books, one-size-fits-all hoodies. While Natalie got monogrammed luggage and spa gift cards, I never said anything. Not because I didn't notice, but because I didn't want Eli to notice. I wanted him to think our family was just quirky, not cruel. He called my mother Nana with this hopeful little tilt in his voice, like maybe if he said it sweet enough she'd love him like a real grandmother should. She never did. I spent years trying to prove I was still worthy, that being a single mom didn't make me less. That working 2 jobs, and juggling school plays, and ER visits, and broken faucets, and overdue bills, didn't make me broken. But every time I showed up for a family event, I felt it. The judgment. The way they looked past me. Through me. Like I'd made my bed and now they had the right to stand around it and whisper. Natalie never said anything cruel. Not directly. She didn't have to. She had a smile that was weaponized in its sweetness. When she handed me her wedding invitation, I thought it was a peace offering. I was wrong. The envelope was cream. Gold lettering. Classic. Inside, my name was spelled wrong. Rochelle instead of Rachel. No +1. No mention of Eli. I called her, thinking it was a mistake. "Oh," she said. "Sorry, I was in a rush when I wrote them out." No apology. No warmth. Still, Eli begged to go. He said, "Maybe this means they finally want us back." I didn't have the heart to tell him we were never wanted to begin with. So I said yes. I rented a dress. Did my makeup in the rearview mirror. Braided his hair like he liked. Put a clip-on tie on his collar. He was glowing the whole drive. He kept asking if they'd let him dance, if Aunt Natalie would remember his card. The venue was extravagant. White roses everywhere. Crystal chandeliers that looked like they were flown in from Paris. Every guest was polished. Every plate was porcelain. And then there was us, sitting at table 14 near the coat closet. I tried not to care. I told myself, You're here for Eli. And it worked until the speeches. Natalie stood. Perfect posture, perfect dress, perfect smile. I watched from the shadows, sipping flat champagne, pretending to be invisible. She talked about love, destiny. She thanked her in-laws, her college friends, her Pilates instructor. Then her tone shifted. And now, she said, I want to thank my sister. Eli sat up straighter. Yeah, she's a single mom, strong, independent, clearly unwanted by anyone else. Laughter. First a ripple, then a roar. I went numb. Then Mom chimed in. She's a used product, but she still polishes up okay. That laugh was deeper, more sinister, like people had been waiting for someone to say it aloud. I looked at Eli. He wasn't smiling anymore. His fingers fidgeted with his napkin. His eyes darted across the room, confused, embarrassed. Mommy, he whispered. Why would she say that? I didn't have an answer. I just wanted to disappear. I reached for my bag. I was going to leave. I couldn't take it, not for me, not for him. We didn't belong there. We never did. And then Daniel stood, Natalie's groom. He walked over and took the microphone from her hand. Calm, silent, dead serious. And that's where everything stopped. Daniel stood there, tall, steady, both hands gripping the microphone like he wasn't sure what he was about to say, but knew he had to say it anyway. The room, which just moments ago had echoed with cruel laughter, was suddenly quiet enough to hear silverware settle onto plates. Even Natalie looked confused, not nervous yet, just surprised that he'd interrupted her moment. Daniel didn't look at her. He didn't look at my mother. He didn't even glance at the guests. He looked straight at me and Eli, like we were the only people in that entire room that mattered. And then finally he spoke. I wasn't going to say anything more tonight, he said, voice even, calm, but I can't just stand here and let that pass for a joke. A few people shifted in their seats. Natalie's smile faltered. She tilted her head just slightly, like she was waiting for the punchline, but Daniel didn't deliver one. I've spent the past year planning a wedding with this woman, he said, gesturing vaguely toward Natalie. And in that year, I've learned a lot about what matters to this family. He paused. Tradition, status, image. Each word landed like a tap on a drum, measured, heavy. But what I saw just now, that wasn't family. That was mockery. That was humiliation wrapped in a toast. And someone near the front let out a quiet cough, the kind people make when they want to make noise without taking sides. I saw Judith lean forward at her table, face flushed, lips pressed so tightly together they looked bloodless. Daniel's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. Let me ask the room something, he said. If someone survives heartbreak, raises a child alone, works 2 jobs, and still shows up with grace, shouldn't we applaud that? Not turn it into a punchline. He looked at my mother then, directly. She's not a used product, he said. She's a f***ing warrior. Gasps. One woman across from me dropped her fork. A man near the bar actually muttered, wow. Daniel looked back to me. His face softened just slightly. I didn't know much about Rachel until recently, he said. But every time she showed up quietly, respectfully, with her son by her side, while most of us were too busy posing for photos or complaining about seating charts, she reminded me of something real. He turned to Eli. And you, he said. You should know your mom is the strongest person in this room. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Eli looked up at me, his mouth open, stunned. I squeezed his hand, hard. And then Daniel turned around. He faced Natalie. And this time, his voice went cold. I can't believe I just watched you humiliate your sister in front of everyone. For laughs. Natalie opened her mouth, but Daniel raised his hand. I don't care if you think it was a joke. I don't care if Judith fed you the line. You said it. You owned it. And you did it with your whole heart. He let out a quiet, humorless laugh. I thought I was marrying into a family that valued integrity, loyalty, kindness. He shook his head. Now I see it was all just performance. Judith stood up. Her voice cut across the room. Daniel, sit down. You're making a scene. He turned on her so fast she flinched. I'm not making a scene, he said. You already made one. You just thought she wouldn't say anything, that no one ever would. His eyes swept the room. Well, I am. He looked at Natalie one last time. I'm not marrying into this. I refuse. Another gasp. Someone said, "Oh my God." I couldn't tell who. Then, calmly, Daniel placed the microphone on the table, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked down the center aisle of the reception hall, right past shocked guests, past Natalie's bridesmaids with their stiffened faces, past the DJ with his hand frozen over the controls. And then he walked straight out the door. Just like that, nobody moved for several seconds, not even me. I still had my hand wrapped around Eli's, not sure if I was supposed to follow Daniel or stay, or curl into myself and pretend I was invisible again. But then I felt something. It wasn't heat, it wasn't shame, it was dignity, rising, like a tide. I stood up. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Eli stood up beside me, holding my hand like a lifeline, and together we walked down the same aisle Daniel had walked just moments before, through the same guests who now looked anywhere but at me, past Natalie, who stared at the floor like a child caught red-handed, and we didn't stop walking until we reached the parking lot. The night air hit my skin like cold water. Eli was quiet. We reached the car and I opened the door for him. He climbed in, silently. When I sat behind the wheel, he finally asked, "Mom, are we still part of the family?" That question. That fun question. I swallowed. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "We're our own family, baby. And right now, that's more than enough." We drove home, in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on Eli's knee as he sat quietly beside me, eyes out the window. When we got home, I tucked him in. He didn't say much. But right before I turned off the light, he whispered, "He stood up for you, didn't he?" I nodded. "He didn't have to," Eli said. "No," I replied. "But that's what makes it matter." The morning after the wedding, that wasn't. I woke up to 5 missed calls. By the time I got Eli breakfast, it was 13. By lunch, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. One of the texts just said, "You need to see what's on Facebook." I didn't want to. I already knew. Daniel's speech had been recorded. Of course it had. In a room full of iPhones and cocktails, nothing stays private. Someone posted it to a wedding gossip page. From there, it spread like wildfire. The video was low quality, grainy, a bit shaky, but you could hear everything. Natalie's words, my mother's voice, the laughter, then Daniel's voice cutting through it all like a blade. You don't mock a woman who survived more than you'll ever understand. When I opened the video, my hands shook. It had over 50,000 views. By that night, 220,000. The comments hit me in the gut, one after another like waves. "This man is a hero. That poor woman, she handled it with so much grace. My mom was a single mother. I'm crying watching this." To every Rachel out there, you are seen. This is the first time I've ever seen someone shut down cruelty in real time. I didn't cry. Not at first. I didn't even know how to. I sat in bed with the lights off, reading every comment like I was drinking water after a drought. Not because I needed validation, but because for once, strangers saw the truth without me having to beg for it. They saw me. They saw Eli. Someone even uploaded a slowed version of the clip where Daniel turned and said, "She's not a used product. She's a fucking warrior." It had its own caption overlay. People were making TikToks. Some women stitched the video to share their own stories. That should have made me feel better. It did in some ways. But mostly, it left me with this strange ache. Because what Daniel said, the way he said it, was the kind of thing I used to imagine hearing when I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling. Back when Eli was still a baby. Back when no one else saw what I was carrying. I didn't want fame. I didn't want pity. I just wanted someone to say, "You've done enough. You've held it together. You matter." And he did. But not privately. Not gently. He did it in front of everyone. By day 3, the video was on Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram Reels. Natalie's name started trending. Not because she was a bride, but because the internet had collectively decided she was the villain. And my mother? A whole thread had been created just to unpack her comment. "She's a used product, but she still polishes up okay." People wrote essays about how deeply ingrained misogyny is in families. Therapists chimed in. Journalists DM'd me. I didn't respond to anyone. I just watched it unfold. Natalie tried to fight back. She posted a picture of her bouquet on Instagram with the caption, "Everyone's so sensitive these days. Can't even joke at your own wedding." The comments were brutal. "It's not a joke if the person's holding back tears. Your sister's class outshines your fake smile. Tell us you've never worked for anything in your life without telling us." She deleted the post within an hour. Later that day, a florist delivery showed up at my apartment. A small bouquet of wild flowers. No return address. Just a card that read, "To the Lioness." I didn't need to guess who it was from. I smiled for the first time in days. Not a small smile either. A full one. The kind that doesn't come from being happy, but from finally being understood. Judith, of course, couldn't stay silent. She called me that night. No apology. Just, "You embarrassed the family." I let her speak for 30 seconds. I counted them. Then I said calmly, "I'm not your scapegoat anymore," and hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. No more groveling. No more pretending she was ever nurturing. I didn't need her guilt anymore. I'd handed it back. Eli, he started to ask more questions. He was quiet the first few days. Then, one morning as we walked to the bus stop, he said, "Why do some people laugh when other people are hurting?" I looked down at him. He wasn't asking for himself. He was asking for me. I told him the truth. Because they're too scared to deal with their own pain, so they aim it at someone else. He thought about it, nodded slowly, and said, "That's dumb." I laughed. "Yeah, it really is." A week passed. Then two. Then came the headlines. Bride mocked sister for being a single mom. Groom walked out mid-wedding. Viral wedding speech sparks national conversation on family shaming. The wedding that ended in truth. What we can learn from Daniel and Rachel. They used our names. They asked for interviews. I didn't give them. Daniel didn't either. But Natalie, she tried to spin it. Post a story about cancel culture, about how the internet misunderstood her humor. But no one was buying it. Not anymore. She sent me a text. It said, "You ruined everything. I hope you're proud." I didn't reply. Because the truth is, I was proud, not of the fallout, but of the silence. My silence. The kind I used to fill with apologies. This time, it meant power. A month later, Daniel emailed me. Just a few lines. "I'm sorry it had to happen like that. But I'm not sorry it happened. You didn't deserve that. Your son didn't either. I wish I'd spoken up sooner." I stared at that email for a long time. Not because I didn't believe him, but because it felt like closure I never thought I'd get. I didn't write back right away. But I printed it, folded it, slipped it into the back of Eli's baby book, right next to the hospital bracelet and the first drawing he ever gave me. One night, Eli and I were brushing our teeth. He looked at me in the mirror and asked, "Are you still sad about what Aunt Natalie said?" I paused. "No," I said. "Why?" He shrugged, toothpaste on his chin. "Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight." That stayed with me, like a tattoo on my soul. He was right. I didn't scream, didn't shout, didn't flip a table or throw a glass. I just stood up and walked away. And someone else, a man I barely knew, decided that silence wasn't good enough anymore. It's a strange thing when the pain you carried privately becomes public, when the world sees you not as a burden but as a survivor. I started walking differently, straighter, lighter, and every time I held Eli's hand in the grocery store, or waited for him outside school, or helped him with his math homework, I remembered something Daniel said that night. She's never needed a stage. He was right. I didn't need an audience. I just needed one person to say, "She matters." Strange what happens after you stop apologizing for who you are. I used to carry my family's judgment like a weighted vest. Every sigh, every glance, every backhanded compliment stitched into the fabric of my spine. I thought that was just the way it had to be. That if I wanted to be loved, I had to endure, shrink, smile. But the moment I stood up and walked out of that wedding, something broke. Not me. The spell. The following weeks felt like shedding skin. The wedding photos never made it online. Natalie's entire Instagram feed quietly reset. A couple of group shots with vague captions like "grateful for growth." No groom, no rings, no happily ever after. Just pretty pictures framed with silence. The comments kept asking, "Where's Daniel? Why no wedding pics? Is it true what happened?" She didn't answer, because there was no good answer. My cousin Melissa reached out 2 weeks later. We hadn't talked since Eli's 3rd birthday. She hadn't shown up then, either. She texted, "Hey, I watched the video. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up." I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back, "Thank you." That's all I wrote. Not because I was angry, but because I'd finally run out of ways to make people feel okay about their silence. My mother sent me an email. She titled it, "Let's not let the internet come between us." As if she hadn't been the one to humiliate me. As if strangers online were the problem, not the years of insults disguised as tradition. The email was long, paragraphs of justification. She said I took it too personally, that Natalie was trying to be funny, that I embarrassed the family by not laughing along. She even said, "You know how we are. We tease the ones we love." I read that line 3 times. Then I closed the email and never opened it again. I've learned something about family. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. Shared history doesn't mean shared values. Some people love the idea of you more than they love you, the version they can mock, dismiss, use to make themselves feel superior. But when you stop playing your role, they panic. They don't know how to exist without the target. Eli, he changed too. He started sitting taller in class. His teachers noticed it. He answered more questions. He stopped asking why Nana never calls him. He told me one night as I was folding laundry, "I don't think I want to go to family dinners anymore." I didn't argue. I just said, "That's okay, baby. You don't have to go where you're not celebrated." He nodded and went back to drawing a comic. A superhero mom fighting off villains with grocery bags in one hand and a calculator in the other. She had a cape, she wore glasses like mine, and a shirt that said, "I do it all." I had to leave the room to cry, not because I was sad, but because no one had ever drawn me as the hero before. Not until him. It's funny how many people reached out after it became safe to friends I hadn't heard from in years, messaged me, some with real support, some just wanting the inside scoop. One acquaintance sent a DM saying, B, you're famous. Crazy. Hope you're cashing in." I didn't reply, because none of this was funny to me. This wasn't content. This was my life, my son, my shame, my dignity, pieced back together one painful moment at a time. But through all of it, there was peace. Not the loud kind, the quiet, steady kind, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix what's already dead. I started cooking again, just for fun. Eli and I tried new recipes on Fridays. Fun Food Fridays, he called it. We made homemade pizza with way too much cheese. We burned cookies and still ate them anyway. We watched movies without checking our phones. We just existed, together, and it was enough. About 6 weeks after the wedding, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of stationery and a pressed flower. The letter read, "I'm not sure where to start, so I'll start here. I'm sorry, not just for the speech, but for every time I stood beside you and said nothing. For every moment I let Mom talk over you. For every time I rolled my eyes instead of reaching out. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I saw you. I just didn't know how to say it back then." It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. Natalie. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. Not angry, not sad, just still. It wasn't the grand apology I once hoped for. It didn't undo anything, but it meant something. It meant that the silence had cracked. Eli asked one night, while brushing his teeth, "Do you think Aunt Natalie feels bad?" I said, "I think she's learning." He nodded. "That's good," he said. "I don't hate her, but I don't want to go to her wedding again." I smiled. That makes 2 of us. Later that week, I got another email. This one was from a woman named Kay. She was a stranger. She said she'd seen the video, said she cried watching it, said it gave her the courage to finally leave her own toxic family dinner. She wrote, "I stood up, and when my brother mocked me, I didn't laugh. I told him I deserved better. I walked out, and my son followed me. Thank you for reminding me that being kind doesn't mean being silent." I wrote her back, just one sentence. "We're stronger than they ever gave us credit for." That's what this all became, in the end. Not just a viral moment, not a failed wedding, a ripple. One moment of truth cracking open decades of denial. Because someone finally said, not her, not today. And that mattered. 6 months. That's how long it's been since the wedding that didn't happen. 6 months since Daniel stood up. Since Natalie sat down. Since I walked out holding my son's hand, and for the first time in my life didn't look back. There was no statement, no press release, no follow-up story on the wedding blogs that initially picked it up. Just a quiet erasure. The venue removed Natalie's event from their portfolio. The photographer never shared the gallery. Even the bakery who had posted the 3-tier cake on their Instagram with a caption that said, "True love is sweet," quietly deleted the post 2 weeks later. Everything Natalie had spent a year planning vanished, like it never happened. But for me, it happened. Every minute of it, every look, every laugh, every step I took toward the exit was real, and it changed me. I'm not going to pretend it was some kind of Cinderella moment. There was no fairy godmother, no castle, no prince. Daniel didn't call again. He didn't need to. That one night, that single razor-sharp act of truth, wasn't about romance. It was about respect, something I'd gone my whole life without receiving from my family. And when it finally arrived, it wasn't soft. It was earned. And it came with thunder. Judith still hasn't apologized. She won't. She's doubled down in the ways people like her do. She says I made the family look bad, that I should have known better than to take things so personally. She told an aunt that I let the internet get to my head, that I heard about it secondhand. And instead of letting it rot me like it once would have, I laughed, not bitterly, not sarcastically, just free. Because I finally understood something. Her voice isn't the one I have to live with. Mine is. Eli started drawing again. Not just superheroes, but comics. One day he handed me a new one. It was a simple 3-panel strip. In the first panel, a small figure stood alone, while shadows laughed. In the second, the figure was joined by another, taller, stronger, saying, "Not today." In the third, the shadows were gone, and the small figure stood tall, wearing a crown. He didn't say anything when he gave it to me, just smiled, like he knew I'd get it. And I did. I framed it. It hangs above our kitchen table now, right next to the chore chart, right across from the "you got this" sticky notes we leave for each other before school and work. Some nights I sit at that table and think back to who I used to be. The woman who flinched every time someone mentioned her son's missing father. The one who stayed quiet at family dinners when the conversation turned cold. The one who thought that love was something you had to earn through endurance. I want to hold that version of me. Tell her she was already enough. Tell her she didn't need to beg for a seat at a table that was always tilted against her. People still send me the video sometimes. Strangers, followers, women who say it helped them walk out of their own pain. I don't watch it anymore. Not because it hurts, but because I don't need the reminder. I was there, and I survived it. That's all the proof I need. One afternoon, Eli came home from school and said his class had a project about the bravest person you know. He chose me. His teacher emailed me later saying she teared up reading his presentation, that it was the first time a student ever called his mom a real-life hero without any help. I printed it, folded it, placed it in the same envelope where I'd saved Daniel's email. Some things you just keep forever. Natalie never reached out again after the letter. I didn't expect her to. She had always lived in a world where accountability felt like an insult, not a gift. But her letter, that small crack of light, was enough for me to put the past down. I'm not angry at her, not anymore. Because the truth is, she never had the power to define me. I just let her think she did. It's funny, the things you remember once the fog lifts, the quiet nights, the microwave dinners, the giggles from the bathtub, the desperate prayers whispered into pillows, the sound of your own voice telling a child, "It's going to be okay," even when you didn't believe it. All those moments I thought were failures, they were proof that I showed up, that I kept going, that I didn't give up when it would have been easier to lie down and stay small. I didn't dance at my sister's wedding. I didn't toast to the bride. I didn't fake a smile for the camera or toss a bouquet or sip champagne while pretending I wasn't bleeding. But I did leave with something better than approval. I left with dignity. My son beside me, my head high, and the deep, quiet knowing that I no longer needed to explain myself to anyone. That is the ending no one expected, and exactly the one I deserved. If you've made it this far, if you've ever been made to feel small in a room full of people who were supposed to protect you, I want you to hear this. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. You do not need their permission to be enough. And if someone ever tries to turn you into a joke, remember this. You are not a punchline. You are the story, and it's still being written. If this story reminded you of something real, if you've ever had to stand up when your legs were shaking or walk away when your heart was breaking, I want to hear your story. Leave a comment, share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their own worth. And if you want more stories that cut deep and rise strong, subscribe. We're not done yet. There's more truth to tell.